Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So today, as I promised yesterday, we're going to continue our class on prayer, and I found the file that I was looking for yesterday, and it appears we have a lot to talk about. And what I mentioned yesterday was that I had done a 2-day workshop, and I just sent everything to Gurunishta to upload. There's 5 files for that. And so far, these classes, there's been 4 classes, so this is the 5th class. And I went through this file of quotes from Srila Prabhupada's books, what he said about prayer. And then I extracted the quotes that weren't covered in the class we did in any of the other recordings, particularly in the seminar. Then I thought we could discuss those. Some of the things are related. They're not exact quotes. They may be related, but if they're related, it just means we're reviewing. And I don't know if yesterday I mentioned that yesterday morning I had listened to a part of a sermon by one of the most famous preachers, I don't know if you call him a preacher, pastors, named Joel Osteen. He gets 15 to 20,000 people in his church every Sunday, and he travels, he's a well-known author. And he was talking about prayer. It was quite interesting, and I want to tell you what he said and reflect on it a little bit in terms of our philosophy. Basically, everything he said was diametrically opposed to Krishna consciousness. It was all about asking God for your material needs. And in some sense, he was on the side, more or less. He said, well, if you ask God for money and you have money, then you can help people who don't have money or don't have enough money. Okay, that's true. But I don't think that was the original intention of asking for money. It was this idea, it's understandable that they would speak about this because their idea is God as the Father. And the idea is obedience to the Father. When you're obedient to the Father, then the Father rewards you. Now, our concept of Krishna as the Father is different because we're in the mood of servant. We're trying to cultivate pure bhakti. So even in relation to Krishna as a Father, it's different from the Christian perspective because we're still in the mood of giving. So their idea is you're obedient to the Father, and in that obedience, the Father loves to take care of his children and give his children all the things that would satisfy their heart's desire. And therefore, in this sermon, he was telling people that you should ask. Don't be afraid to ask big. And God wants to give you, and therefore he will give you whatever you want, give you more than you want, if you just ask. So there's some truth to that. But in our philosophy, we might say, yes, God will give you even more than you ask, but we don't ask. And we take what he gives. And we know that sometimes he doesn't give because we're not qualified. So it's very interesting listening to him to speak, because he didn't really say anything that could be supported in our philosophy. And this is called prosperity gospel, that God wants you to enjoy because the Father wants the son or daughter to enjoy. So ask and you shall receive, ask more, you'll receive more. And whatever it is you want in life, ask for it. And so it's very centered around what do you want, not what is God, so much what God wants of you. That may be implied, but it wasn't stated, at least not much. Not much. It wasn't prioritized. It came as the side point. So we're going to read what Prabhupada said. And it's very interesting what he said. It just gives us a perspective on prayer from the position of the pure devotees. How do they pray? So that's what we're going to be talking about. And as you know, Pure devotional service means to satisfy Krishna, to become detached from material life, and so on. So you can imagine that that's what the pure devotees are praying for. And if you imagine that, then you're correct. And we're going to discuss this. And this could go on for many, many classes. And I'll read what Prabhupada said, and I'll discuss. And then if you have questions, you can ask them. I just have to put in the title. Excuse me for shaking you up. So this is actually going to be the fifth in the series. If you haven't heard the other ones, then you can go online to hear them. Now I'm going to put on chat. So if you want to make any comment or ask any question along the way, we can do that. And also, we're now contemplating doing classes on Facebook because it's easier and there are more people that would watch it. And I guess we could, I don't know, Gurunist will have to figure out how the chat would work, if it works through Messenger or whatever. And then they would be uploaded to Ustream channel, because we could load it to YouTube, but Ustream is kind of convenient, everything is here. Okay, so this is from the teachings of Queen Kunti. The teachings of Queen Kunti are a compilation of lectures that Prabhupada gave on the prayers of Queen Kunti from the Srimad Bhagavatam. I happened to be present when Prabhupada gave those lectures, or most of those lectures. That was in 1972 in Los Angeles, at least the lectures I heard. The whole Vedic way of life is meant for detachment, and therefore Kunti prays, kindly help detach me from this family attraction. This is Kunti Devi's instruction. So here we see an example of an anartha, or an obstacle. I don't know if you call it anartha, but an obstacle, or something that a devotee feels is an obstacle to their bhakti. And they're praying to Krishna to remove it, and family attachment is something which gives pleasure. So here, in this case, she's recognizing the pleasure is an actual obstacle. We had discussed previously that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj had a wonderful prayer in which he asked Krishna, please remove anything that's not good for me, and bring anything into me, into my life, which may be unpleasant if it's good for me. So Kunti's prayer is in that vein, that what is giving me pleasure, this family attachment, which is one of the greatest material pleasures, she felt it's an impediment because she's identified materially with her family. And you may ask why. These are pure devotees. But she's saying, I'm identifying as their mother with material, maternal affection, and that kind of attachment I want to remove. Attachment between devotees is good, but material attachment, or attachment which increases our material entanglement, is not good. So she's feeling that her attachment, there's a part of her attachment to her sons which would be increasing her material entanglement. So she's praying to Krishna, please detach me. She's praying for a state of consciousness, because detachment requires a state of consciousness, a way of seeing things, seeing the world, seeing others in a way that you can become detached. So she's praying, then essentially, Krishna, to change my consciousness, so I have a consciousness which allows me to detach, or change my heart so my heart won't be attached to these family members. And in the same way, we can pray, my dear Lord, please do not allow me to become too attached to whatever it is that I'm too attached to, or whatever it is that I'm attached to that I feel could become or is an obstacle to my bhakti. So the idea is that when we're praying, we feel some sense of helplessness, that this attachment is strong. I don't know if on my own I can overcome this attachment, so therefore I'm praying to you, Krishna, you please help me. And that help can come in terms of intelligence. It can come in terms of attitude. It can come in terms of perception. You start to see things differently. And in order to be detached, we need to see things differently, or we are attached because of the way we see things. So there's so many things we're attached to which are not beneficial for us. And this is our conditioned nature. We come to Krishna consciousness condition. But there are specific things, as we were discussing yesterday, that may be major stumbling blocks for us. And so naturally a devotee would and should pray to Krishna to help me overcome the attachments which are so strong that I feel on my own I will not be able to overcome them, or I will not be able to overcome them easily or for many years. And I need to overcome them now. At least I need to loosen the knot. This example of material attachment is a knot. Bhagavatam gives that. Hridaya Granthis, the knot of the heart. So at least if I can loosen that knot, then I can function in the material world, not being overly attached to anything. Now, just like I've come back to Alachua now for the next 2 weeks, we're staying in our home. So this is the home we've had. Well, we've actually had this maybe for 12, 13 years. So you become attached to a home. It's where all your things are. My daughter's very attached. This is where she grew up, right? So is it wrong to be attached to home? It's natural. It's this, and the city you grew up in, your friends and so forth. So a devotee doesn't pray that I'm not attached to anything. What the devotee prays is that my attachment won't become an obstacle. Because naturally, if you're not attached to anything, how could you function and how could you take care of anything? One time Prabhupada said, he showed his watch and he said, this watch, everything is Krishna's and this watch is Krishna's, but you won't get it from me. So we have this idea that I'm a steward or a guardian of what Krishna gives us. So sometimes I can become attached to something because it's useful in Krishna's service. Just like right now, I have a little lapel mic, which was kindly given to me by this wonderful devotee. I won't mention her name because she'll be embarrassed. I've already mentioned her name, but she gave me, and it's plugged in right now to the iPad Air, and it makes better recordings than if I record directly through the microphone on the iPad Air. And it's a nice service because all those who will listen to my lectures in the future, the audio will be very good. Sometimes I use it with my phone because the phone is easy to carry. I can just plug it in and record a class. And so actually I'm attached to that because it's a really good little convenient mic and it makes very good recordings, and I like everything that I do to be in the recording world to be as good as I possibly can make it. So I'm attached to it. I have other microphones that I use for different purposes. I'm attached to them. What does that attachment mean? It means I'm attached because it's very useful in Krishna's service, just like you might have a very nice computer. You're attached to it because it facilitates your service, but you're not attached to it in a way that you would take another birth. So I can't leave this world because I can't leave my MacBook Pro. It's just like, it makes my life so convenient and so free from anxiety, and it enables my service many, many fold with my iPhone 6, my iPad and my MacBook. I don't know if I could actually give up my body. I don't know if I'm ready yet. So if that's the case, yes. That's the kind of attachment we're trying to avoid. To become detached, let's say, from your wife or husband or from your children would be bad because that would create a dysfunctional family because it's not natural to be detached from them. It may be natural when you're 75 because you're preparing for death and you need to be detached from everything. So at 75, yes, detach from your MacBook, detach from your family. That's a different story. But even at 75, if you can use those things and be detached, then you don't have to give them up. I mentioned many times that Prabhupada was asked about attachment to children because it's all throughout Bhagavatam that these are the main attachments to wife and children and home. And Prabhupada said it's natural to be attached to them. But if you become too attached, then it becomes an impediment. So here, Kunti is praying to become detached from something that she feels is an impediment. So we don't have to pray to become detached from everything. completely detached, because then we'd be dysfunctional. If you become completely detached from your husband or wife, that will end in divorce. If you become completely detached from your children, you won't take care of them, and they'll end up with all kinds of problems. Physical problems if you don't take care of them, emotional problems. Why didn't my parents take care of me? So that's not what it means. It means that we should be attached to taking care. Or Prabhupada said, if you're attached to your children, then make them pure devotees. That attachment should be there. So we don't want to be crazy detached. But as I said, the specific things which are, you feel are impediments, specific attachments which you feel are impediments. And everybody has them, and we all know what they are. Sometimes we say, like, I'm really attached to this. It's really bad for me. I'm really attached to listening to this kind of music, or I'm really attached to movies, or reading this magazine. Something that's not Krishna conscious, and you realize it's not helping you, and you realize it's wasting your time, and so forth. It's like, I don't know if you know this, but I'll tell a little story. Keep the class interesting, because stories are interesting. This is a surfing story. Okay. As most of you already know, I grew up in Southern California, very close to the ocean, and most people who grow up close to the ocean either go body surfing or go surfing. And so growing up near the ocean, that was just normal. We just, as kids, we just took a bus and went to the beach. And when I was of age, I started surfing. And surfing it's very easy to become attached to it, because it makes you feel really good, and it's really healthy. And if you haven't done it, I feel really sorry for you that you've never experienced that. But anyway, I don't recommend you start now or come back in the next life to experience it. But it's something you get very attached to. And I don't know when it was, but it must have been the mid-'80s, so it's maybe 15 years after I'd become a devotee. And I had, when you become a devotee, you give up frivolous sports. But then there was this person selling a surfboard for $20, and new surfboards now I think are $300, $200, $300, $400. And this surfboard was exactly like the surfboard that I used to own before I was a devotee, which meant I could probably still ride it. And at that point I was only 35, so it's fairly strong. So I thought, it's only $20. I could use it to get some exercise. It would be good exercise. And the temple was 2 blocks from the beach. So I could just go, after Sankirtan or before Sankirtan, and catch a few waves, and surfers are just in incredible shape. So, you can go to the gym, you go for a walk, you can go for a run, you can go surfing, you do something to get some exercise. We all need exercise, and when you're about 35, your body slows down. In your 30s, you need exercise. So I thought, all right, $20 investment, let's see how it works. So I'd go out, and I found that even after 15 years, within like half an hour, I was kind of back to where I was before. And I was probably the healthiest I've been, probably as a devotee, that summer. But I ran into a problem, because my idea was that I would go out for a half hour, like you go to maybe a workout for a half hour, an hour. But the problem was that surfing is addicting. And there are good waves and bad waves. And the good waves are addicting, and the bad waves are not. The bad waves are just not fun, it's just kind of blah, boring. And if they're big and bad, then it's boring and suffering at the same time, if there is such a combination. So what happened was, when the waves were good, I said, well, I'll just stay out a little longer. I couldn't come in. So sometimes I would be out for 2 hours, and I had service. Now that was happening quite regularly, especially when the waves were good. And then I was kind of planning my day around the best times to surf. And as you could imagine, it was becoming more than just an exercise routine. So after that summer, I said, no, this isn't working for me, because I can't regulate it. It's kind of consuming me. And it was an attachment that I really couldn't control. So I said, it's better I don't do it. And so I stopped. So now, you might be asking, is it okay if I go surfing? half hour. Guruji says half hour maximum. Anything you do frivolous, half hour. If it's frivolous, but it's healthy, then we call it exercise. And I sometimes joke when devotees give me desserts, like really rich, delicious desserts. I take a small, like a portion of a teaspoon, and then I will show you how renounced I am by taking a little bit and not taking any more. Just see. Because it's more difficult to take a little bit and not take more than not take any. So you can do a little bit, but not much. Otherwise, you will get in trouble. Okay. So the point is that you know in your own life there may be some things that you're very, very attached to that are impediments that deviate you from your bhakti, that deviate your mind or heart or activities, they waste your time. So if something if something that you're very attached to is a problem for you, then following Queen Kunti, you pray, Krishna, please help me overcome this attachment. And as I said earlier, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be attachment. It just could be anything that you need help with. Naturally, when you feel that it's overwhelming, it's too much for you, you can't do it on your own, you pray to Krishna, Krishna, I need your help. This is too difficult. I'm so attached to this. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next one. If you have any questions on this right now, before I go to the next one, because each one is different, then ask them. And every quote I will speak about, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Some quotes we may end up speaking the whole class. So if any questions come to mind, I think it would be good to talk about questions in relation to these things. I think this is, I find this as an important topic because, as I said earlier, we can't be without attachment, and it would be crazy to live without attachment. Then we would have no relationships with devotees. We wouldn't even know how to choose things, because like when you shop for things which you can use for Krishna, if you're completely detached, you don't even know if you like it or don't like it, or if it's good or bad. So you can't be completely attached. And our philosophy says, if there's something you're attached to that you could use for Krishna, it would be wrong not to use it for Krishna, but you have to become detached from it. So we have to learn, we have to recognize we are attached to things, we will be attached to things. Just like I'm a father, so I'm attached to my daughter, I'm attached to my wife. I'm a spiritual master, I have disciples, we have very close relationships. I'm attached to them, they're attached to me, that's natural. But if I'm so attached to my disciples that they control me and I can't give them proper instruction, then that attachment would be detrimental. So that aspect of the attachment would be bad. It's not that attachment is bad, but there are aspects that could be bad. Sometimes we find that someone who's not a bona fide spiritual master will be controlled by a disciple because the disciple is buying them with their money. Or maybe the disciple is famous and that disciple can make inroads for their guru. And they have to kind of play according to what that disciple wants. So that would be wrong. As we've said before, sometimes a disciple is attached to their guru in such a way that in their absence, they don't do well. They give up their service even sometimes. So that attachment is kind of the material aspect of the attachment. So there is spiritual attachment, and we want to keep the spiritual attachment. But Prabhupada said that if you become too detached, then the problem is you won't use things for Krishna that you could use. And that kind of detachment is wrong. So there's a sense of becoming detached. Sometimes you have to become detached from what you're detached from. Sometimes we're attached to being detached, but the thing that we're detached from is something we can use for Krishna. So being detached from something I can use for Krishna, if it's something important and very useful, is a kind of attachment. That detachment becomes an attachment. Now the question will come, and it's a good question, that I understand the principle. If I detach from something which can be used for Krishna, like I'm a physicist, but I say, well, I don't want to join the Bhaktivedanta Institute because I'm just over that, or I'm so into it that maybe it would become an impediment. To say I'm over that, but you could use it in Krishna's service, if you could use it in a big way, in a successful way, to say I'm over that, would be kind of an artificial detachment. At least I'm speaking generally. It could be. That I'm capable of doing something very big for Krishna, but I just don't want to because I'm finished with that. That's, in fact, basically saying I don't want to because I don't like to. That's not good. Then that's what Shastra is saying. You should be using everything in Krishna's service. You shouldn't detach from it. Now, what if I said, I am so into physics that if I start doing research for the Bhaktivedanta Institute to verify Vedic text with modern scientific findings, I would lose my mind because I love it so much. I'd go crazy. I would stop sleeping, I would stop eating, I would stop chanting. My life, I'd forget my wife, I'd forget my children. That's how attached I am. In that case, you could make the argument, yes, you're not mature enough now to engage this in Krishna's service because it would become detrimental. So Prabhupada did look at things in that way. He didn't want us to engage with something that we were good at the same time overly attached to, if it was going to be a problem. So it's true, Shastra says you shouldn't detach from something you can use for Krishna. At the same time, if you're not mature enough to use it and it would be detrimental to your bhakti, then yes, you should detach. You should stay detached. And usually as you advance, you come to a point in your Krishna consciousness where you can use it in the future. But to take this verse, Rupa Goswami's verse, to not give up something that can be used for Krishna if using it is going to be destructive for you because you're so attached to it, it's better you don't use it until you're more mature. And a lot of older devotees can testify to this, that a lot of things they're doing now that they just renounced when they were young because they knew it wouldn't be good for them, they wouldn't be able to handle it. And as older devotees, they're more balanced and they can use it for Krishna and in the detached way. Okay, so now, it looks like Eddie has a question. I have to go a little closer to read it. Is it possible that the attachment helped me to improve my service? Yes, for example, I'm attached to your lectures and your bhajans. If you're attached to something which is Krishna conscious, that's perfect. Because hearing, chanting, remembering, praying, and so forth, those are direct Krishna conscious activities. But when we're talking about taking something which could not be Krishna conscious and is therefore used in Krishna consciousness, that could create the problem. So, when you're talking about activities which are transcendental by nature, then becoming attached to them is perfect. Yeah, I should be. I should be attached to chanting, hearing, reading Prabhupada's books, praying, studying. It's really good. And just like Eddie, you like to study, so you can use your studying propensity to study Prabhupada's books. So that's great. So now you're attached to studying Prabhupada's books because you're attached to studying in general. And you use that nature and become attached to Prabhupada's books. And obviously being attached to Prabhupada's books is fantastic. Or, somebody likes to sell, so they go out and sell a lot of Prabhupada's books. Fantastic. So they're attached to selling, but they're selling Prabhupada's books. So that's good. As long as you're not attached to the glory that you'll get from selling so many books. And not again, but we've talked in the past, it's about motive is also a factor. So, to be attached to your spiritual master, to be attached to hearing from him, that's all very good. As long as you follow. Some people are attached to hearing, but not attached to following. Something's wrong there. The attachment to hearing is good, but be attached to following also. So there's so many things we should be attached to. There's so many things that is good if we're attached to. It would be bad. It's bad if we're not attached to them. let's say you're attached to chanting and you chant 192 rounds a day and your family starves to death. Now, the attachment to chanting is good, but the starving to death part of the result of your chanting is not good. So, you have to see things in terms of balance and effect. So many things should be attached to the deities, the devotees, kirtans, festivals, Sankirtan, book distribution, our service, all these things. It's really good if we're attached to it in a way which is not entangling us materially. When you become attached to Krishna consciousness, that detaches you from material consciousness. So that attachment is good. And you really don't have to ask the question, because the question is answered by your detachment. If what you're attached to is causing you to become materially free from your material attachments, then that attachment is good. If what you're attached to is causing you to become more materially attached, the attachment is not good, and you'll have to balance it, see how to utilize it. Now, again, there are many, many things that we're naturally attached to that maybe we just can't be detached from. But there's a level of detachment in which I may still be attached, but I'm not so attached that I can't function normally. So that's another aspect. So when you might be attached to your mother, your father, and your mother or father is sick, and you're helping them, and you don't like to see them suffer. But it doesn't affect you to the point where you stop chanting your rounds. You become so depressed that you can't chant your rounds. Now, sometimes life becomes difficult for us, and things get topsy-turvy. And what I've seen, when life becomes difficult or topsy-turvy, some devotees just kind of give up Krishna consciousness, which to me is a paradox, because that's when you need Krishna consciousness the most, is when life is most topsy-turvy, right? Sometimes devotees lose faith. Why did Krishna allow these things to happen to me? So that's not good. But if we're going through difficulty, okay, I'm a human being, I'm experiencing some suffering, I'm not above entirely the modes of nature, some lamentation, some depression, sometimes this happens. But the sign that I'm doing well in Krishna consciousness is that in spite of all that, I don't give up the 4 regulative principles, I don't give up my service, I don't give up my 16 rounds, even though I may be disturbed. So that means that you're still detached enough that you continue your service. So that's important to understand. You may be attached to your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, these other devotees. What if a dear god brother, god sister of yours is injured or dies? So naturally you're going to be upset. But the detachment is that you're not so upset that you can't function in a normal way, in a fairly normal way. So that's a sign that we're detached. Or the same thing, the example I gave of surfing. I'm detached enough that I went out a half hour a day, and I said, that's my exercise. Instead of doing yoga, I did surfing. And I saw it not as a frivolous sport, but a way to give me exercise, because I know I'm lazy and I'm not going to do yoga, but I like to surf, so I'll go out for half an hour. But my detachment is I just do it for a half hour. Even if the waves are good, I come back. So I can function. I'm attached, yes, but I can function with that attachment. I'm attached to my wife, yes. Am I so attached that I will meditate on her at the time of death? We want to be attached, that we don't want to be, we naturally are, but that my attachment to Krishna is stronger than anything else. That's the point. That's what one devotee said. He once called his wife and said, I just want you to know that I love you. Isn't that nice? A husband should say that. I want you to know that I love you, but I just have to tell you I love Krishna more. That's it. There you go. I think that answers the question, doesn't it? Maybe you can remember this. I want to tell you I love you, but I love Krishna more. That's what you tell your wife or you tell your husband. And it was actually his wife told me that. And she said, I was so happy to hear that, because that's perfect. Because any wife who's a good devotee would feel a little anxiety if her husband said, I want you to know I love you more than I love Krishna. Which is actually the truth, because we don't really love Krishna yet. But what he was saying is, I want you to know I'm more attached to my service to Krishna and Krishna consciousness than I am to you. And she was happy to hear that, because she didn't want to hear that he was more attached to her than Krishna. So I think that kind of clears it up. As long as, the point we're making is that whatever we're attached to shouldn't interfere with our attachment to Krishna. And the more attachment to Krishna, the better. Yes, we want attachment to Krishna as much as we can get, right? Don't we? Yes? You agree? Wish I could hear you respond. Is there any way? I guess if we did conference call, then you could respond. Or there's software where you could get on there and respond. But it costs money. And Nick was going to find out. So we have to, Guru Nishta. If you're here, ask Nick to find out. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. That's unless someone has another question about attachment. Well, let me talk about it a little more. Maybe it'll be redundant, but I think it's important, especially for younger devotees. Because when younger devotees hear about detachment, they try to detach because they think it's the right thing. And it's true, it is the right thing. But often what they do is they detach from things they're not detached from. So they become weird. Because they believe they're detached from it when they're not. And they're acting like they're detached from it when they're not. And later on, they will someday confront the reality that they're not detached from it, and they didn't know they're not detached, and it catches them by surprise. So how do you become detached from something you're not detached from? It's I'm attached to eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, but I can't eat meat, fish, or eggs. I cannot oversleep. I took a vow to be celibate, and so forth. So to say, the day after my initiation, yes, I'm completely detached from all of these things, would be to delude yourself. But what you are is you're committed to not indulging in them, and so there's a difference. So you don't want to overestimate your detachment, because you need to take precautions to act in a detached way towards things you're attached to. So if I take a vow to be celibate, and I think, well, because I took the vow, it's all downhill from here. No, it should be the opposite. Because I took the vow means now I have to be more careful. And I have to realize, no, I still am attached, but I took a vow to act in a detached way. Of course, there has to be some detachment to take the vow. I'm not saying there shouldn't be. But I'm saying don't overestimate your level of detachment. Just because, let's say, for example, you can practice celibacy, it doesn't mean that you're detached. It means you're detached enough to practice it. But when a young devotee believes they're more detached than they are, they run into trouble. Then they miscalculate. It's like a GPS that's gone off, and you end up in a bad place. So be realistic, and don't be crazy detached. Like I don't know if this happens anymore. It probably does in some places, but probably less. Someone becomes a devotee, they mistreat their parents, they don't call them, they call them demons, they preach very heavily towards them. Because now that I'm a devotee, I'm detached, and I realize my parents are demons, and they fed me meat when I was young, and they never told me about Krishna, and misguided me, and so on. There's not detachment, it's just immature, what would we call it? Maybe I would call it fanaticism. It's immaturity and it's fanaticism. And every devotee, when they mature, realizes that their parents did so much service for them. Materially, they owe them, at least gratitude, appreciation, and when they're older, if they need to be taken care of, then there's some obligation there. So at the same time, there's a detachment in that these were the parents who didn't give me Krishna, and my spiritual master Prabhupada gave me Krishna, and so they are my real father, Vedas are my real mother, father and grandfather, your guru, Prabhupada. So that's there simultaneously. Like if you read my latest Vyasa Puja offering, which I don't know if you can read it, it was in my Vyasa Puja book, but anyway, within a month, actually within about, to be precise, within 16 days, the new Vyasa Puja, well, it's in the Prabhupada Tributes book, and the Prabhupada Tributes book should go online, and you can read it. And basically, what I was saying is that Prabhupada was a father I never had. He was the father who enlightened me. He was the father who taught me music and gave me the best instruments. Like this. It was filling a gap. And it doesn't mean that in saying that I'm saying I don't like my father. He was a bad person and so on. I wasn't saying that at all. But as a young devotee, that's kind of how we could become repulsed. And there's a difference between repulsion and detachment. When you're repulsed, it's just like getting sick and you don't want to eat, but it doesn't mean you're a yogi and austere. It just means you're too sick to eat because you ate something, or you ate too much of it, or something didn't go down well, right? So sometimes, when I was a kid, we had these cookies called Oreos. There was chocolate, and then the center was just probably just sugar and cornstarch or something with some flavor. The sugar center, the white center. What do you call the center? My brain is dead. Anyway, you have a cookie, and you have the cream, sugar cream in the center, and then another cookie. And when I was very young, I ate 8 of them. I really like those cookies. I think I've only had them once since I was a devotee somehow. Somebody, somewhere, an Oreo cookie showed up. And even, so I was a young kid and I ate 8 of them and I got really sick. And I vomited, and I remember 8 Oreo cookies. I was probably, I don't know, 8 years old or less. Don't eat, if I tried to do that now, I'd have to eat 66 of them. And definitely I would get sick. Maybe I was 8 and I ate 8. So I think they should put a limit on the package. These are dangerous. Don't eat more than 4 at a time. So I got sick, I vomited, blah, blah, blah. And you know if you eat something and you get sick, when you look at it, it makes you sick, right? Does that mean I really didn't like Oreo cookies? Does that mean in the future of my life, there'll never be a time when I won't eat Oreo cookies? No, but at that moment, I thought that way because I got so sick that just looking at them made me sick. And you know when you're sick and you're a little nauseous and people show you food, you look at the food and the food makes you sick. Just don't show me that. You can't eat it. I don't want to see another Oreo cookie. Ugh. Isn't it? So life happens that way. That some things happen and we get very frustrated, very repulsed, very sickened by it. And then we just say, I don't want that anymore. I never want to get within 20 feet of another woman. I never want to see another man. They're all jerks and idiots. I hate them. I never want to work under another boss. These guys are crazy, obnoxious. So it appears to be detachment, but it's repulsion based on a very negative, repulsive experience. And I'm sure you all know what we're talking about. So all I'm saying is that sometimes as young devotees, we mistake detachment from repulsion, and then, I'm renounced, I don't care. And we're not being realistic. And the person said, I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to do that. And then, a year later, he's doing it better or more and more than anybody. Than the ones who never talked about it, the ones who kind of said, yeah, I'm kind of attached to that. But they had the sense to remain detached. And the other one said, oh, I'm not attached to it at all. Then a year later, 2 years later, he's the one doing it. So it's kind of an alienation from where you're at and just kidding yourself, because your repulsion is not your detachment. Detachment is a result of becoming attached to Krishna, right? Yes, that's our philosophy and that's our experience. So, because most of you listening to this, at least live, are younger devotees, I don't want you to fall into this artificial repulsion detachment and at the same time try to detach yourself from things which you should be doing, which you should be engaged in, that you're attached to, but they can be engaged in Krishna service in a way that you don't become controlled by them. So that's the whole idea of detachment, is not to become controlled by anything. Right? Because if you're attached to something, you become controlled by it. You know, don't be attached to your wife. Don't be a dancing dog. Does that mean now you don't do anything she asks you? You don't say, I'm not a dancing dog. I'm not going to do it. Honey, can you take the trash out of the... can you bring the groceries in from the car? I'm not a dancing dog. I'm not going to do that. I'm detached. No. See, that's where it gets stupid. And in ISKCON today, these things still go on. You know, that's not what it means to be detached. It means to be, your senses are being controlled by the beauty, the voice, the touch, and so forth of the woman, so that you can't be Krishna conscious. It doesn't mean when your wife asks you to take the groceries out of the car, you're detached. Or can you take the trash out? Actually, here in Alachua, I have a service for when I lived here before, and I was doing this. It's quite interesting because I was doing this after I started initiating devotees, and I'm here alone, and I've never had any disciples here. Although, when I move back to America, you're certainly welcome to come and visit. So we live in the country, and if you want to dump your trash, you dump it in a trash can, and you put that trash can in the car, and you go to the recycle place. So that's what I do. I take trash to the recycle place. I always thought that was interesting, because if my disciples were here, they would go completely crazy. You can't take the trash. You can't deal with it. You get dirty, it's smelly. But I do it because my wife certainly isn't going to do it. And that's what I do. So then I could think, I am being controlled by my wife. She should be doing it. I'm detached. No, it's not. You understand? That when we're detached, it means we're attached from being controlled. Being nice and being controlled are different. Being controlled is when your wife moves her eyebrow, your heart starts beating, and you can't control your lust. That's being controlled. Not when your wife says, could you wash the dishes? And you say, no, I'm not controlled by my wife. I don't wash the dishes. You understand? Because I know this is common sense, and I think some people, if they weren't devotees and they listen to this lecture, they think, what is he talking about? And that's the point, that somehow or other, when we don't understand the philosophy, things get all crazy, and we lose common sense, and we just, I'm not going to wash the dishes. I wear the pants in the family. What are you talking about? I'm not going to be controlled by them. And the other guys go, yeah, don't be controlled by your wife. Don't wash it. Don't take the groceries out of the car. You should do that. You work hard. This is stupid. But these things go on, right? And where's the bhakti? Where's the relationship, the soft heart, the devotion? Yeah, if you're actually detached, then wash the dishes. That's detachment. I'm not going to wash the dishes, but then you're completely controlled by her beauty, and you're running after her to have sex, and you're saying, I'm the man. It's stupid. It's not even stupid. It's beyond stupid. It's absurd, insane. But unfortunately, when we're immature and young in Krishna consciousness, sometimes we get mixed up and we do things that when we're older we look back and we say, I was stupid, I was crazy. Yes, and I don't want you to be stupid and crazy. I want you to be mature in how you process detachment. I think it's really important to understand that attachment is human, it's normal, and it's necessary. I mean, if you want to really be detached, become a sannyasi. Then, you can just live alone. You don't have to interact much with anybody. And you certainly don't have to interact with anyone in a long-term relationship. But if you want to be married, or if you're a temple president interacting with the devotees, or a leader interacting all the time, then to be detached from everybody would just drive everybody crazy. It's like Prabhupada wasn't detached. He'd go on a morning walk with 20 people. He'd have people in his room all afternoon in India, all afternoon and evening. He'd be talking, preaching with people, as many as that could fit in. So he was very attached to preaching. He was very attached to his disciples. When he was detached, when it was time to give things up, if a disciple left, his heart was broken at the same time. What could be done? He would say, what can be done? They have their independence. So there's this balance, you see, like sometimes I have people who want to be disciples, and at some point they fall away from Krishna consciousness. And so do you think I'm so detached that I don't care? I care very much. I think about them. I think about all of them. I can tell you who they are. I don't go a month or two without thinking about them. When will they come back? But it's not that my life has changed at all because of that. So, there's human emotion and feeling, but our detachment, which is natural, but our detachment is that we function normally in Krishna consciousness. So that's the idea. I don't know, do you have some questions on that? Or am I just saying something that's so obvious that you're all thinking, why are you saying this? This is like, everybody knows this. Okay, so, I don't know you so long, but I'm getting attached to your lectures because you are very inspiring. Yeah. Well, we had talked about this. We had talked about this in the topic on. Well, we talked about it twice. We gave lectures on marriage, and so we had to talk about attachment because naturally the question comes up. I'm attached to my husband and my wife. Is it right? How much? How little? Is affection not Krishna conscious? Is it Krishna conscious? Then it came up, we're doing a series on Mondays, specifically for devotees in Australia, for their time zone, which is going to be tomorrow morning, Eastern Standard Time at 6:15 a.m., if you want to attend it. 6:15 on the East Coast of America. And we've been doing a series on the truth about love. What is love? And so naturally we had to discuss this topic of affection. And one of the standard verses that's quoted is in Bhagavatam, an instruction by Kapila to his mother, and said that same attachment that you have for things and people of this world, if you apply that to Krishna and his devotees, especially the verse says, if you apply it to his devotees, then you become perfect. So yes, we want to be attached to devotees. As Eddie was saying, to be attached to listening, to hearing about Krishna, that's really good. Isn't it? Yes, that's the whole point, hearing and chanting, Kirtanya Sadahari. We want that. So, we want to become attached to Krishna, and we want to balance our material attachments so we're not repulsively detached, repressed, suppressed. But we gradually develop a mature detachment. And what you'll find is that as devotees mature in their detachment, that actually they're more able to deal with situations in this world and people in an extremely affectionate, balanced, loving and caring way without becoming entangled. And I know sometimes younger devotees tend to push away from things because they can't deal with it. it's true, sometimes you can't. And so you just pull away. So that's okay if you have to do that. But don't do it in a crazy way. Do it in a respectful, proper way. Explain to yourself. Like to your parents who said, this is something I really have to do. It's really important for me. And I know you want me to stay in college and so forth, or you want me to do this or that. This is really important for me. I have to do it. And be kind and be understanding and sympathetic, empathetic. That mature devotees can do. They can create boundaries at the same time, act in a way which is suitable to deal with people in a normal way, in a way that people would expect. Otherwise, if we're not like that, and then we're people will think there's something wrong with us, they won't be able to relate to us. Or, as I wrote this article, many of you have read, can we become worse after we become devotees? And so the unfortunate reality is, yes, because there's a sense in that so-called detachment to lose compassion, to not care. Well, they're all non-devotees, they eat meat, they're going to suffer, and I'm going to the temple to get my pakoras, because that's important. So there's this sense of lack of compassion. That can develop. I don't care about my family, I don't care how they feel, I don't care about my mother. We don't want to be that insensitive, we're devotees. Now, circumstances may be such that you can't deal well with your parents because they're very harsh or angry or heavy with you, and they'll dominate and run circles around you in a way which would not be good for you and ultimately not good for them. But I'm talking about parents who are not like that, and sometimes devotees have really done the wrong things with them. So as you mature, you can maturely be kind, compassionate, empathetic, sympathetic, etc. At the same time, it doesn't become an impediment to your bhakti because you're very fixed in your Krishna consciousness. And obviously, if you're not fixed, then maybe you try to do that, and you'll oh, Mama, I'm so sorry. I'll give up Krishna consciousness, and So you don't want to go to that extreme, because Krishna consciousness is important, and it's your opportunity to go back to Krishna. So you have to maintain this balance, right? It's all about balance. So become attached to everything in Krishna consciousness, but don't turn against people. Be kind, be understanding, be sympathetic, empathetic, mature. And the way to do that is by becoming more attached to Krishna. Because the more you're attached and fixed in Krishna consciousness, then the less other things can bother you. So there was a point where when I was working on my latest album, which came out 2 years ago, I actually started in 2001 and it came out in 2014. Because at some point I didn't have time to complete it, or the standard to which I wanted to complete it was difficult to achieve. So at that point, I took 2 courses. One was a course in recording, because at this point I had no one to engineer, and computers were coming out and it was getting easier to afford, and I never engineered anything, so I had to study that. And then I was writing some songs in English, and there was a course being offered in songwriting at a community college, and I thought, well, why don't I take that course just to learn something? I thought it'd be interesting, and I also had contemplated perhaps even writing songs that could be sold as a way of earning money on the side. So in order to do this, I had to listen to recordings, because I had to see how I had to listen to recordings, because these recordings that are professionally done are like standards upon which to, at least as a starting point, to develop an ear to understand how to record and mix music. What is a good recording? What is a bad recording? Now, you just take for granted because at least the popular music is recorded well, and really well. Devotional music, it's getting better. If you go back 30 years, not so well, but now most of it's recorded quite well. We have more facility and we know more. So I was listening to a lot of non-devotional music, both to learn about songwriting and to learn about recording. And I listened to a lot. I listened to more than I ever listened to. But I was listening to it from this perspective of what is a good song in terms of music and lyrics and how they work together, and what is a good recording in terms of how instruments are recorded, where they're placed in the mix. Anyway, that's another topic you wouldn't understand everything about. But you go to school and you study this, so I was studying it. I was reading books on it. But at this point in my life, I was more mature in Krishna consciousness, so even though I was listening to all these songs, fortunately there were songs I didn't grow up with, because I was listening to music that came out after I became a devotee, so it didn't have like this nostalgic value, because the only time I heard these songs was basically when I was doing Sankirtan or at a market or somewhere where they were playing music, or it's coming out of people's cars when we were distributing books. I didn't grow up as a non-devotee, so it wasn't ingrained as a samskar in my heart that I would listen to the song and think, oh, that's when I was 16 and we were in San Francisco doing this or that. But in any case, it was rock and roll music, pop music, ballads I was listening to. And it was all being employed in trying to make this album better. And I didn't end up stopping my devotional music or listening to kirtan or anything. So I could do that in a more mature state. I don't think I could have done that when I was first a devotee, or even would have wanted to, because I would have been repulsed by it all, number one. I wouldn't have had the desire. So, or the opposite end, I would have been so attracted to it that I would be playing guitar all day instead of chanting Hare Krishna. So, the point I was making is that the more you become attached to Krishna and to your spiritual master, to the process of Krishna consciousness, to your service, the more easily it is to utilize things which perhaps you had strong attachment for before you were a devotee in Krishna's service, right? So yeah, those of you who know me know that I like music, and if you stick a key... When I was recently in London, I have a keyboard in London that was bought for me by a very generous devotee. And the keyboard has audio accompaniment, so it's got a whole band with it. So, sometimes I sit around and I sing for the devotees, and I sometimes make up songs spontaneously. And so any of you who know me know, or if you give me a guitar, I'll start playing. You know that I like to do music. That's an attachment that I have. But I don't sit around and play guitar all day. I don't sit around and play keyboard all day. I don't even actually... Well, in Mayapur I have a little keyboard, and here my keyboards are all packed up. But I would do play a little bit here and there. And usually it's played with the idea of how I can use this in Krishna service most of the time. Actually, I have a piano in the house, I forgot. And I sometimes play kirtan on the piano and other songs I write. Actually, that song on my CD, Radhe Sham Sham, that was written on my piano. I sat down and started playing and started coming up with these ideas. So I want to utilize my life fully in Krishna's service. So even though there's a piano, guitar, things that I am very attached to, and I will admit, I played guitar every day before I was a devotee for 6 years, from the age of 13, for 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 hours every day. I don't think I ever missed a day, seriously. And when I was 17, I think I went surfing every day of the week. These are like strong attachments. But the point is, as you mature, you become attached to utilizing everything in Krishna's service. So you just want to be able to please Krishna with whatever it is you have. So you can do it without becoming attached. And that's the point you want to get to. I hate guitars, I hate keyboard, I hate it. That's immature. You might say, I like it, and I like it so much that I don't know right now if I'm mature enough to utilize it. And that's realistic. So I think it's better I don't play guitar, I don't play keyboard at this point in my devotional service. You could say that, or you could say, I very much like this, and I really want to do it for Krishna. That's all I want to do. I just want to do music for Krishna. That's all I want to do. I want to sing songs about Krishna, do kirtan. Then, fine. That's perfect. So I hope this makes sense to you. We've got an hour. And we only did one quote, and I think of 4 pages of quotes. So we're going to have a lot of discussion on this topic. I think maybe one nice prayer is, Krishna, help me become balanced in my attachment and detachment. Because this was a topic on prayer, but we got very much into the psychology and philosophy of attachment and detachment, which is important, especially for younger devotees. It's really important. Older devotees, they understand this by their own mistakes they made when they were younger devotees and their own maturity. But younger devotees sometimes can really misunderstand things and act in ways which are not nice, are fanatical, black and white, unkind, and so forth. Okay? Is that all right? Do I have your permission to end? Everybody say yes. Because right now, I heard the bell ringing. The bell ringing means there's an offering being made. And since there's an offering being made, I'm kind of thinking I should go in and meet all. We have some guests here and take prasadam. So that's what we're going to do. Okay? Thank you very much. If you want to come, as I said, tomorrow, it will be 6:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 5:15 if you're in Mexico. That's 3:15 if you're on the West Coast. But if you're in London, it's 11:15. And if you're in Australia, it's 8:15. And if you're in India, it is like what? 4:15? Something like that. Yeah, it'll be 4:15 in the afternoon. Okay. Hope you got something from this. I would suggest that a lot of what I talk about, sometimes it seems very simple. And it is simple. But at the same time, some of the simple things I say have taken me many years to articulate so simply. And so I don't want you to make the mistake that when you hear it, that sometimes you think, yeah, that's simple, I understand. So I think often it's good to listen to these talks over again. If you don't feel you completely got it, and it went very deep, listen to them again. It's always going to be better the second time. You're going to pick up on a lot you didn't pick up. I find 2 to 3 times it really makes a difference. And so try that, and I think you'll get a lot more. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Prema.